Good evening, everybody. How's everyone getting on? Hope we've all had a good day. Didn't get too wet in the rain. We had some crazy rain today. We're going to get Tiff on, and we're going to chat through some ortho-restorative stuff. This one should be pretty cool. About this, I think we're going to get a good session for you today. Oh, straight in. Look at that.
Oh, it worked. Good
and
stuff.
Relax. How are we doing?
All good. Thanks, Reed. Thanks for having me today.
No, thank you for coming on. It's excited to get you on, and we're just all the big names keep coming. It's really good. I know you said you've actually caught a couple, so that's cool.
Yep, definitely.
Oh, other people want to get in as well. Sorry, it's just for Tiff tonight.
That's all right.
How was today? Was it clinical day for you, or?
Yeah, clinical day. I do at the moment. I'm doing kind of 2 very full clinical days, quite very long days actually, and then basically the rest of the week is kind of online teaching support, or lecturing or teaching or something like that. So the bottom line is, if you're teaching, it really helps to be working as well, because it never really stops otherwise. You've always got something new that you see and you're learning every day. So yeah, and I do really enjoy it actually. I have to say, the way I'm sort of working now, I don't get that Sunday night feeling anymore that I used to get as a younger dentist, perhaps. So
it's a bit of a better balance.
Definitely.
And how is the teaching going now with the academy and stuff opening back up properly? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've been running hands-on courses for a little while. I mean, I think we started again sort of February, March, when everyone was. Obviously, it was all social distance, masks, and all the rest of it. But yeah, we've actually been running hands-on courses. We run them almost pretty much every week, and intertwined with a lot of our live online stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we got recorded online stuff as well. But yeah, and the live online stuff actually does work really well. We send people out kits and do other bits and pieces. Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. And like I was saying to you earlier, I think we're going to have to kind of think about doing things a bit differently, but it does work really well.
I think habits have changed for the consumer, haven't they, in terms of how you want to take on the content. Obviously, everyone was doing webinars and all sorts over lockdowns. So it sort of just changed the mindset a bit.
Definitely. Well, the first time I did, I mean, we've done lots of webinars and stuff. The first time I did a live online hands-on. So we kind of do one, believe it or not, where we send stuff out and they're doing it, and then we actually the delegates take photographs of their work, post it on a forum, we evaluate it. The first time I did that, I just thought, this is going to be rubbish. but actually it worked brilliantly well, and it's surprising how, but that's a sort of, it's a live hybrid plus there's some recorded stuff as well. But it does work really well. I don't think, I still enjoy the live face-to-face experience more, no doubt. But it's been nice doing some stuff from home. Actually, thinking about when I used to sort of jump on a plane and you take your 2 days wherever on flights and 1 day in the middle, and actually I can do almost the same thing sat at home over 5 or 6 hours. So it is amazing what you can do.
I think having been on a course, a hands-on course since COVID, I think definitely missed that social element of going on a course and stuff as well. So I think the hybrid model is definitely here to stay.
But it's not the best. It isn't. And you're right. And actually, you know what? Even the live courses, the first ones we had, it was lovely doing the face-to-face stuff. But what we actually missed was actually being able to just go out with the delegates in the evening and have a bit of a chat with them. And you couldn't do that. So now we can start to do that again. It's starting to become so much better.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Jane Sproson says, of course you enjoy it. It's your calling, Tiff. There we go. So, well, in terms of that, anyone who doesn't know who you are, if you just give us a quick little introduction, and then we can sort of jump in, chat some ortho-restorative stuff.
Yeah, I'm Tiff Qureshi, and I've been around for a while. I qualified in '92, King's College London, taught by people like Martin Kelleher and Brian Miller and all these people that I'm assuming you may have heard of.
Brian's still there.
Yeah, Brian is still there. I know Brian well actually, and yeah, I've been I think I've been quite lucky. I've been in the right place, right time. I think I was also kind of lucky that I didn't work in central London, weirdly, because I had so many opportunities too. But because I stayed put in my practice, I think I realised the value of long-term dentistry more.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've been around quite a bit. Obviously, it certainly had a lot to do with the align, bleach and bond phenomena that everyone sort of does now. I guess I was one of the people that started it off. But actually now, for me, that's developing into something quite different than just aesthetic dentistry. So yeah, that's me. And yeah, I'm one of the directors, I guess, and clinical teachers for IS Academy.
Yeah. And as you're saying, that's where a lot of it probably came from for yourself, is because you were in that one place over that period of time, seeing stuff coming back and assessing. Right, I've heard you speak a few times. I've been to a couple of your events, so I know the story. But yeah, so just run through that with us. You know, where did that sort of come from? Seeing these patients 6 monthly or whatever, and building through.
Well, the first thing, you know, is I've my practice. So I did 1 year VT in Rochester with a lovely dentist who actually still works there, I think. And then I left that practice and I got a job in Sidcup. And it was, I don't know, how old was I, 23, 24, something like that. And and at that time was 100% NHS practice. Owner was my partner, who is partner who's now Dan Patel. And so for the first 6 years, I was just sort of, you know, VT, doing fundamentally NHS work. And as I've sort of often say in my lectures, probably around about 5 or 6 years in, I was nearly done with it. I literally nearly gave up, very, very close to kind of, I was interested in doing other things. I really didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy that kind of constant fight you seem to have with NHS patients at the time. And, you know, and I was going to say quite a controversial thing here, but there was definitely a kind of, at the time, a kind of entitlement mentality people had that really hacked me off, when, you know, you're telling them that they need something, and, you know, then they look up to you and they say, oh, is that so you can buy a Porsche or something like that? And you're just thinking, it might sound funny, but actually it's incredibly hurtful. So I nearly was out. But basically what kind of kept me in was, luckily, the people I knew, and there were, you know, some courses I went on, but fundamentally it was actually buying an intraoral camera. You know, back in 97, you know, when the first one came out, and that literally changed my whole career. And I have to say, you know, I say often, from that day forward, I cannot think of a day where a patient has ever doubted anything I've said. And and 30 years later, from when I qualified, you know, we still have the fundamental problem when people sort of ask what's wrong with, you know, what are the issues with dentistry? And one of the biggest one of them is lack of trust. Let's face it, it is. And I find it really sad that actually, you know, our leaders, or, you know, the people that teach us and the curriculums or whatever, don't realize that photography and forms of photography are the solution to most of the problems that we have in dentistry. And intraoral cameras are literally Mickey Mouse, peanuts type of bits of software. And it's something everyone should be doing. And it isn't just something that we show a patient and filling after. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is monitoring. So, you know, if you ever come into my practice and look, you'll see I'll go up on my screen and I've got 16 years of checkups on this one particular system. When you've got that and you pop your images up again, you know, the patients are completely invested in you. They're interested in what they're seeing. They're looking for the changes, and you've got nothing else to talk about except for their teeth, which is what you want. And that most of the time you're backing things off, saying, "Oh, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that." You know. So I think that was, for me, the kind of the thing that gave me the confidence to then think, actually, I can do some other stuff, whether it's aesthetics and, you know. And actually, I think the big thing was probably, you know, I mean, you may not have heard of a chap called Michael Wise, but maybe you have. Mike Wise is a legend, really, in dentistry. So I was lucky. I took his course quite young, and you know, most of the work was like completely out of anything I could ever do on my patients. But it kind of got me thinking about aesthetics and function, that sort of thing. And then after that, you know, all the veneer courses happened, really. Which sometimes sounds like a bad thing, but it wasn't, because you kind of learn a lot. You know, you learn how to take photographs, how to do impressions, how to talk to patients, and that sort of thing. So yeah, the veneer courses back in like 99 and 2000 were really important as well. You know, I probably wouldn't do things the way I did in that order, but they were quite important as well. And then from that, all the align, bridge and bond stuff started, which I'm sure we'll get into effectively.
I think that's what main thing we're going with. Kelsey Rose says, absolutely agree. And we've had a question already. Any recommendations for the intraoral camera then? What software is it that you're using? This is the fundamental question, okay? And I've been asking and trying to talk to software suppliers for about the last 5 years. The problem is they can't be bothered with intraoral cameras. They want to sell everyone a scanner, which is fine. And I've got 2 scanners. I've got a Prime scanner and a Trios, and they're amazing. But are they the same as intraoral cameras? No, they're not.
an intraoral camera is much easier to do a checkup with, and it's a lot less faff, and patients actually look at intraoral camera images and clearly identify with what they see versus a digital scan, which is just CGI. Let's face it. Okay, it looks like CGI. So what do I use? I use a camera. I wouldn't recommend this camera, but I happen to have a camera. It's called a Schick camera with a K on the end, by the way, a Schick camera, and the software is now owned by Dentsply and it's called Dicom imaging software.
Dicom, yeah.
And I'm currently trying to talk to Dicom actually. I have to say, actually, Dentsply have been really helpful actually recently in connecting me with the people that are looking after that software. And I'm hoping to see the latest version of it. The current version I've got is literally 16 years old, and I pray every day that it doesn't collapse or fall apart. But at the moment, but what's great about it is that effectively it just presents the images in periapical form, so that they're all where you are, upper left six, right? You know what I mean? So you can literally you can go through your whole, and you can skip through, this year, and you see all the images come up. And it's linked to the patient. That's just what you want. And honestly, that can't be more than £2.99 app software. But for somehow the dental industry makes that one of the most difficult things to get hold of, typically. Okay, so I'm sorry, I can't actually answer the question. I know I am going to be testing out Dentsply camera because I've been bugging them about this software. So I'm hoping that that's what I can recommend soon. But I can't give you an honest answer at the moment.
Not yet. So then you're seeing these cases, and it's tooth wear, right? Mainly that you're monitoring, everything you're monitoring, but you're noticing this tooth wear.
Tooth wear is one of the things. Tooth position.
Yeah.
Actually overjet, overbite, guidance, everything basically. And we're kind of looking, but obviously tooth wear is something that patients really see as well.
Mm-hmm. So then you're then taking these pictures, you're communicating that with the patient. How are you going around sort of assessing what's going on? Is there a certain checklist you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so an ortho-restorative checklist is kind of the way I think now. Now, of course, ortho-restorative doesn't mean you have to do ortho on that patient. What I mean is that actually, firstly, are teeth moving? Now, teeth moving is actually one of the biggest blind spots we've had in the profession. Teeth do move. There's tons of evidence to show that, but the simple fact of the matter is, all the little parts of the profession don't really take that on board. So, and the problem is if we use dental charts, which are absolutely useless, you're never going to see a tooth move. You take photographs, you see the tooth's moved. So tooth movement is one thing. And when I talk to patients and I show them a picture of their teeth for the first time that they're crooked, I often say to them, what we're going to do now, we're going to play tooth sat nav. So you can actually understand what direction your teeth are likely to move over time. Don't panic. It's not a big disaster, but I want you to understand that this lower central is likely to be drifting in. Maybe that upper central is moving forward, etc., etc. Then I say to the patient, now, as that starts to happen, what you might start to notice is that your teeth, which, you often see me doing this whole envelope of function thing, but I say to them, your teeth should be like this, but if your lower tooth starts to drift forward, it starts to make an early connection with this front tooth, so that as you chew, you might start to just knock that upper tooth. Obviously, that's one particular movement. You might start to knock your upper tooth. As that occurs, you start to expose this dentine. Dentine is X times softer than enamel, etc., etc., etc. So we go through, we look at tooth position, we look at the current amount of wear that there is, we look at current overjet, overbite, deepening of bite, anterior guidance, canine guidance. So one of the key things that is right at the top of my list for any patient is I never ever want to let a patient who has reducing anterior guidance or increasing anterior wear develop into posterior wear. And there are so many people who actually right now are walking around with either collapsing canines, wearing teeth, and they're starting to do this. And as they do this, the back teeth start to get those connections. And it's really interesting because obviously you see all these people with like crowns on the back, and if you look at the history they've had, they would have had like loads of amalgams and stuff. No patient, in my opinion, ever should end up needing a whole load of crowns on the back because their amalgams are broken. Because you can always do something with the front. In fact, I'll stick my neck out and say, no patient who sees a dentist regularly should ever need a full mouth rehab. Okay, never. And the fact that they do is simply the fact that we're not taught to look at tooth movement, to look at reducing guidance, and then going in and doing something simply about it. Because I reckon if you do it early and simply, if you do it early, it's actually really easy. If you do it late, it's bloody hard and it's expensive and lots more stuff can go wrong. So that's kind of why we're doing this. This sort of ortho-restorative checkup is a way of getting dentists, myself and other dentists that I teach, to identify things early, talk to their patients, not feeling like you're selling anything. You're not selling, I don't like that term, ethical selling. I know some people teach that well. I don't like that term. The truth is, tell them. Don't sell, tell. If you tell them the truth, you don't sell anything, because then the patient is aware. And then what happens is, a lot of these patients come back, and I would say probably once every couple of days, one of these patients will walk into my practice, and they'll say, Tiff, that tooth that you said was moving and might be going dark, I can really feel it banging against my upper tooth now. We do a little Fremetis test as well, by the way. That's something I do every checkup. So if you've got a constricted envelope and you lean on the teeth, patient bites in their MIP, you'll often see the tooth in the wrong position. They pulse like that. And I say to the patient, that's artificial, okay? Don't worry, but that will help you understand that shouldn't be happening. And a patient will come in and say, I think it's moving. Do you think we could get it fixed? And for me, that is like, bang, that's what I want. I want them to say to me, Tiff, give me a line bleach and bond for functional reasons, because I want my teeth to stay good. I don't want them to say, what I don't want to be doing is, here's some digital smile design. This is how great you could look. It's a really good idea. It will change your life, blah, blah, blah. I've got nothing, and there's nothing wrong with that. And don't get me wrong. I think smile design and digital smile design has its place. I used it, that sort of thing, for years. But what I also did is I realized, looking back 20 years, I did it on patients that didn't really want it.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the truth. And, a lot of people that sell those sorts of smiles, it'll happen to them where the patient walks in through the door and you look and you think, why did I do that? What the hell was I thinking? Basically I was just selling something because I learned it on a course. And I think when you get to a point that you see that, and the shame, and the responsibility that on certain patients, I think, I feel really bad, but equally it's kind of good to learn. You know what I mean? So this sort of whole ortho-restorative checkup workflow kind of comes from the idea that I don't want a patient to ever need to have a load of crowns and veneers, et cetera, and there are going to be patients that have perio, et cetera, who will, they're going to need lots of stuff, treatment, et cetera, but for your average patient, they just shouldn't get there. And I think the more of us that were kind of educated about how to stop them getting there, the less patients would have half of these problems that are too expensive to resolve anyway. So,
and that's one of the things that I'll say when I see a patient. Like, again, I don't do any form of sort of alignment stuff, because we've got other people in the practice who do it really well. So that's the kind of place that we're at. We say, go and see those guys that do it great, but this is why, and I'll explain all those things. I've been seeing you doing various talks about it, and you always say, you could say it's an investment or whatever, but you say as a benefit, it might look better, but functionally is there. And the other argument is the front tooth, right? The breaking anterior front tooth that breaks over and over again, because when you check it, it works fine, but the teeth drift and then it doesn't work properly in guidance.
Exactly. I mean, as I say, it's that sort of changing pathway wear through tooth movement. And of course, there might be a layer of parafunction as well, which can come and go. But the bottom line is, when that sort of dawned upon me some years ago, and I started looking at photographs, and because I was taking repeated occlusals of photographs of patients who weren't having treatment, and you're looking, you're thinking, bloody hell, these teeth have moved a lot. And then you start looking at the data, you think, little study, and that study, and that study, teeth move. And I was talking to sort of ortho friends. They said, oh yeah, teeth move, but I don't think they really understood the functional consequence, because why would they? They don't see patients regularly or for follow-ups. But a lot of the restorative people that I knew, they weren't really that aware. And I think one of the problems is because we're not taking regular pictures, it's so easy not to see it. And the only way I kind of came across it was because patients of mine that I'd done something on and hadn't realised that their teeth were moving, all of a sudden they come back with either something has chipped or something has drifted. And so therefore, the way I figure it now is that for me, ortho and restorative, some people call it an interface. It's not. That's completely the wrong term. Ortho and restorative is almost, for me, it's one and the same thing. You know, you can't, it's not an interface, it's not something that does this. They're actually, you know, orthofunction, occlusion, all these things are linked together. So yeah, the repeatedly chipping front tooth, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I think back, before I really understood, if I think back to my first 10 years of clinical practice, I probably ended up prepping 25 to 30%, maybe 40 to 50% of the teeth I placed crowns on the front teeth. I placed because I didn't realize there's a constricting envelope function. And I reckon right now, millions, if not billions of patients around the world have unnecessarily had teeth prepped for crowns or veneers because the dentist didn't realize that the teeth are moving. And of course, there are some people that say the dentist mustn't do ortho. And I've heard that many times. But the problem is this whole concept of the dentist mustn't do ortho has actually resulted, you know, I've seen it absolutely clear in my practice. I've seen it in many other practices. It's absolutely clear that not doing ortho causes damage to teeth, which could then mean you end up doing a more invasive treatment. So the fact of the matter is there's no, you know, for me, ortho is not like a, you know, nothing against facial aesthetics, okay? But it's not like facial aesthetics, which is a kind of, I can do it or I don't need to do it. You don't have to do facial aesthetics to be a good dentist. It might help you being a better dentist, don't get me wrong. But ortho, you know, I'll go as far as saying, if my general dentist didn't do ortho and his or her treatment for my repeatedly chipping upper front tooth was a crown or a veneer, I'm out the door. As simple as that. It's as simple as that. And the other thing is, if they're not taking occlusal pictures of my teeth every year or every 2 years, how the hell do they know if my teeth are moved? You know, there's so many examples of it, and one of the things I think we do is we're too obsessed with taking photographs of patients we are treating, and as a result we don't take pictures of patients we're not treating, and therefore we miss a lot of this stuff which is kind of right under our nose. So
well, carnologist said a light bulb just gone off in my head, so there we go, we're getting through. So you've assessed these patients, you've communicated it all. We're going to start looking at some treatment modalities. So you've already said sort of early doors with the lime, bleach and bond, and that was the kind of stuff that you were doing. So one of the questions we did have actually was sort of differences between various alignment systems. Yeah, do you have a sort of, you know, are you using a mix and match of many systems? Do you have, you know, for some cases like a fixed orthodontist that you work with as well, or are you doing forms of fixed?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think the key thing here is just to make sure that when you assess a patient, you assess them without thinking about the aligners that you either need to sell to pay for your scanner or some system you're tied into. That's the first problem, okay? And I think
got to get that diamond award from Invisalign.
Exactly. Well, it could be Invisalign, it could be any of them, because a lot of them will kind of incentivize you to do more, and I can kind of get that. I understand that, but I think the key thing is, I always say, is just put that aside, because, you know, and another thing, never call yourself an aligner only practice. I think you've got to be mad to do that, actually. You know, I think a patient, you know, a medical legally sniffing patient could really screw you down on that. You want to basically make sure you offer everything. You might not do everything, but you've got to offer everything. So for me, it's about what's going to be right for this patient. Because although, yeah, most of what I do are aligners, okay, clear aligners particularly, there are certain cases I think, why the hell would I want to go put a patient through all of that clear aligner treatment where for 250 quid an arch they could have indirect bonding, blah, 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 you know, land bill or whatever. Or I'd refer them, and what I'm going to charge for my aligners, I could get Asif Chatty to do lingual ortho in central London for virtually the same. So, and it was probably a lot quicker. So you've got to kind of look at what's right for that actual patient. And of course, you know, a lot of patients want aligners, but and you know, it generally tends to come on top of the list. Now, differences between them, well, it's, as I say, a little bit depends on what I'm trying to do. I tend to use you know, systems. I do a lot of like Sure Smile and Clear Correct, which are kind of similar to, you know, Invisalign in that you've got, you know, large amounts of treatment available, your software and all the other stuff as well. I tend to use those more on, you know, slightly more complex cases and where we're moving, you know, incisors, canines, premolars. I don't tend to move sixes much. I can. I mean, with the way we teach it, we don't really suggest them to general dentists or younger dentists or whatever inexperienced to move molars around. It can be issues with that. We normally say refer if they really need that doing. If it's really minor, you know, 2 to 2, whatever, I might use IS Lab or something like that. or 3 to 3, whatever. And sometimes, yes, I still do an Inman, and less than I used to. But I tell you what, when I did one, I finished a case a couple of weeks ago, and I tell you what, there was nothing that works as quickly. I know you shouldn't say that, because it was all this fast brace stuff, and this fast. You should never talk about that, because but bloody hell are they quick sometimes, and it actually takes you by surprise, because it's just efficiency. It's no magic. It's just efficiency of movement. And sometimes for some patients, it's just the right thing to do. So yeah, occasionally, I still do them. And actually,
for people that don't know, can you just run us through Inman a little bit?
Yeah, an Inman is like a removable appliance spring aligner, basically. And I kind of sort of discovered, I didn't invent it, but I sort of discovered it and developed the concept about, probably 16 years ago, maybe something like that. And but it was that very much that actually formed the core teaching ethos of IS, funny enough, because with Inman, we kind of created a set of protocols of, firstly, restricting movement. Okay, so in that we were moving these, but we're not moving these. That was the first thing we wanted to do. Okay, then we were also, with Inman, we kind of had this whole planning protocol of the whole concept of what we call landmark teeth, and for function and for overjet and overbite. And actually, it was quite easy to control that and see it, because it was all on 3D printed models. And so actually then, a lot of those concepts we applied to fixed ortho, with like Space-Wise, the sort of digital software, with our planning software, and we then applied it to clear aligners as well. And and as IAS grew, of course, with fixed ortho, that's where, I don't know if you remember Anoop Maney, but Anoop Maney, who used to be very well known for 6 Months Miles, he's kind of the reason 6 Months Miles was so big in the UK. He actually, we had a meeting, we bumped into each other in Germany at the airport once. He was teaching, and he actually said to me, and I think I can say this, fine, but he said to me, you know what, I'd really love to teach 6 Months Miles the way that you teach Inman, partly because, and with nothing against 6 Months Miles, but partly because we were doing it in this sort of very non-salesy way. Okay. And he did, and he kind of came on board, and then we sort of did something with clears, and then after that, Ross Hobson came in, the professor, who basically gave us a good ass kicking to make sure that we were doing everything perfectly. You know what I mean? So like proper assessment. No, you do this for this sort of treatment, etc. And that's how the whole process went. So yeah, Inmans are still very important. I still use them, and actually a lot of people still make them, believe it or not, because I can kind of see, because obviously IS Lab make them. But for certain patients, they do work really well. There's certain patients I wouldn't bother with clear aligners, where actually I know an Inman would work pretty well. But most of the time, in reality, I'm probably using a mixture of either IS aligners, short smile aligners, or clear correct. And what are they like? Well, they're all very good. It basically all comes down to the interpretation of the digital software. So whether you're using Invisalign or whether you're using Sure Smile or Clear Correct, the key thing is, don't just take a scan and say, make me some straight teeth. If you do that, you shouldn't be doing the treatment at all. The first thing is, obviously, you need your assessment to be thinking about the planning. So I often start, after you've done your kind of full assessment, and once maybe you're agreeing to compromise, and you're not going to change the molar relationship, I'm then often looking functionally, aesthetically, for something called a landmark point or a landmark tooth, which is upright, which in theory should have the right amount of overjet relative to the lower, enough room that isn't pressing the lip forward, that's in the muscular neutral zone, whatever that means, we know what it means. And then once I know that's there, that kind of then leads the case. So I'll ask for certain things with my aligners and the way that they come back. I never want to see, here's a tip, I never want to see a IPR carried out on overlap contacts, ever. If you do that, I think you're doing dentistry incorrectly. As simple as that. So if you've got like big crossed over centrals and you're starting with 0.5 mil IPR between those teeth, it's a simple question. You shouldn't have done that. You should have rejected the plan and then got a different plan set up. So there's lots of little things that you can input into, and I give a lot of instruction when I'm getting my aligners back, whether it's clear, correct, short, smile, whatever, or IS. Then when it comes back, I'm going to go through a checklist. Have they held my landmark point? Where's my overbite going? And how is my overbite relative to the restorative treatment that I want? Because sometimes So it's really important. You know, a lot of people, they kind of just finish the edges of the teeth where they think they should be, and really it should be where the gum should be in the right position. And if the teeth are short, you should bloody, pardon my language, but you should bloody well build them up. You don't put dentine to touch against dentine. I mean, God, yeah, you know, what kind of why would anyone do that? Anyway, the point being is that you then have to think about where we are and where your potential overbite is going to end up with restorative treatment, how that might affect your anterior guidance as well. How close the canines are to each other. Obviously, if you're compromising, you know, and not aiming for class 1 canine occlusion, which would be ideal, you might have to place your canines in a way to make sure they're connecting correctly, etc., etc. And also another thing is when you're looking at your digital setups is to actually look at staging, because, like, for example, you know, there's this whole thing at the moment with aligners where, do I wear it for 1 week or do I wear it for 2? And, oh, you just need to wear it for 1 week. 1 week, if you wear for every aligner for 1 week only, it's pretty likely the cases are going to go off track. So what I tend to do is I get my cases often set up for 1 week wear, but I'll tell the patient when I know that there's certain movements going on, more tricky movements, by watching the staging, I'll say to the patient, these 5 aligners, you're going to wear them for 2 weeks. These 2 aligners, you can wear them for 1 week each or 10 days. Does that make sense? So lots of little things you can do, and that can actually really shrink down the amount of time that these cases take as well. So, yeah.
In terms of at the end with refinements and things
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
And the reality is, the better you do, the more information you input, and then obviously things like the better your IPR is and your instructions and your attachments are really important as well. They're super, super important attachments, getting them right. A lot of people get them wrong. I can tell you it's not taught well. You shouldn't just chuck a bunch of Flowable in and thumb it on and cure it. You do that, the aligner I can guarantee you won't seat down correctly. There's lots of little things you need to do. But fundamentally, if you do all of that, you actually will find that you get very few or need very limited refinements, actually.
And in terms of IIS's training, are you training on multiple systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we are a completely open source. So, we have an IIS lab, and some people might think, why would you teach another system when you've got your own lab? Because we're teaching the best stuff. You know what I mean? We're not going to just tell people you have to use our stuff. And the simple answer is, I don't use my own stuff for everything. I use it for some of it, but not all of it. I use it for simple stuff that I need to, all my wire retainers, all that kind of stuff, indirect bonding, blah, blah, blah. But I still use ClearCorrect and SureSmile because, you know, for certain things, I know that they can produce 25, 30, 40 aligners really simply. I've got the digital plan that I need to see in a certain way. And it's just more choice, really. So, yeah, we do teach. And actually, we are currently teaching for Dentsply Sirona, so that we run their SureSmile course. And we also teach ClearCorrect for certain DSOs out there as well. And we mentor for ClearCorrect as well. And we mentor loads of Invisalign users, loads. So a lot of people who are, you know, doing Invisalign, in fact, we've got loads of Invisalign people come on our ABB course because, you know, they just kind of want to learn our thinking, really. And then after that, we often sort of see them on our forums, and you can basically just get help with your case if you're stuck or if you want your ClinCheck checked or refined, etc., etc. That's what people do, basically.
That's part of it as well. You've got the IS forum that you can be putting
it's
cases.
open source.
Open, is that, and is it, when you say it's a forum, is it just with teachers or is it anyone that's within the forum?
No, no, you can't. It's generally meant to be kind of private one-on-one mentoring. You can have your case open for others to view if you want, and some people do that. And actually, a member or someone who is signed in could comment on someone else's thread. They generally don't tend to do that, but most of the time it's one-on-one mentoring or a group of mentors looking after one person. Of course, you know, it is paid for. You know, if it can be free if you're an IIS member and you're having an IIS case, like an IIS lab case mentored, that's free. But you know, whether it's some of the other systems and stuff, people just pay for it. But it's quite similar, and I'd argue better than, you know, people like get their ClinChecks checked. Well, you know, it's fine getting it checked, but actually you will actually check your assessment, diagnosis, your plan, refine your ClinCheck, and actually help you all the way through. And it's actually a dentist doing it, not some other person. So that's really the idea of what we do. And there's a whole bunch of us that do it, actually, and more people who you might know, actually are getting involved in that. I better not mention their names. Other people who are in the field, and not just ortho. Actually, I'm talking about restorative and perio and other bits and pieces as well. We've got kind of mentor team building. So.
It all comes together, doesn't it? One of the other questions we did actually have about tracking things like that was dealing with rotated laterals predictably. It seems that
yeah,
good
question. It's a good question. I mean, it's the first thing to say. It's often the size of the lateral is something to take into consideration. Has that tooth been naturally worn down? As in, is it a slim tooth that's only slim because it's had many years of being straight and then it's just drifted out, in which case you've got it could potentially be then harder to get the surface area on. That then actually makes something like an attachment placed on that tooth, particularly if it's rotated, if it's an aligner here, even more important. And a little tip that I'll give is basically when I place attachments, there is either my fingernails, literally, let me show you here. Either my fingernails are literally either side. Can you see that there? Yep. Of the attachment, there's a template right here. Okay, so my fingernails are doing this, or I've got a pair of tweezers either side of that attachment, pushing down against the tooth. And I generally place one at a time, not the whole lot in one go, because I want my attachments to look absolutely pucker and exactly like they are on the digital setup. So. If you do that, you're giving yourself an advantage for a start. The second thing is what actual movements are going on. So, for example, if you're trying to, with a lateral, if say, for example, you're trying to rotate and extrude the tooth, well, then it's difficult because you've got kind of like, it's an antagonistic movement technically. There's a great guy actually who described this whole concept of antagonistic and synergistic movements, who you should interview. His name is Josh Rowley, really nice guy, orthodontist who was a dentist before, an orthodontist. And actually, that's a difficult movement. So therefore, in the aligner staging, something like that, you would want the staging. And it doesn't happen automatically with all the systems, I can tell you. You think that it would, but it doesn't. In that case, then actually, you often want the tooth to perhaps the rotation to occur first and maybe the extrusion to occur after, okay? Because actually rotating a canine often intrudes it, okay? It's just the kind of movement often intrudes it. So there are little bits and pieces like that that... sorry, I'm getting abuse from my brother, so yeah, there's little things like that are important. And another little tip is what I've done in the past for difficult laterals, particularly if there's enough room around them, and that isn't always the case. But I've actually sometimes deliberately widened the tooth with bonding before I've actually taken my scan, so that we can get more grip on the tooth. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you have a really super slim tooth for whatever reason, and I just slightly flare the tooth a touch, and I tell the patient I'm doing that just so that we can get a grip on the tooth and turn it, and then of course I'm going to bang that bond off with my IPR at some point. But the IPR on that tooth, and as I think I said it earlier, I would always make sure IPR on overlap contacts is carried out later once the teeth are aligned. So I never do IPR on overlap contacts at the start, meaning you always want to move the teeth to a more aligned position before you carry out the IPR, okay? But that's only possible, particularly if say, for example, if you're proclining teeth, you can only do that if you've got decent biotype, okay? So again, you might be restricted by that. So again, every case is a little bit different, really.
Which is something we didn't cover in assessment, actually. But one thing, just as you're saying there, in terms of like the sort of staging or phasing of it, is that something when you're doing the plans with the alliances, is that something you're maybe mentioning at that point to say we want to do this earlier or later? Or
I do tend to do that, but I have to say I do think that certainly my experience with the aligner companies I use, they're generally pretty good. Occasionally you do see things move perhaps when you don't want it to move, but the key thing is then to just take charge and say, actually, can we change that? And they will. So I've found that as I said, fundamentally the ones I'm using the most at the moment are Sure Smile and Clear Correct, and I think they're working with the planners has been really, really easy. They're really good, and they kind of understand what I'm asking for, and I really have to kind of correct a lot. But I usually do change something And it's not to do with that they've done something wrong, but it's more to do with the fact that I'm thinking about the teeth in that patient and what I'm actually specifically after. And maybe I didn't ask for something up front. Okay, so, but I generally find the staging to be done, really well. And I'm actually finding if you really, so if you carry out everything properly, we're getting very, very little in the way of, I'm needing very little in the way of refinements and further treatments and stuff. So.
Perfect.
Well,
Just going to say, we've got two people from Dentsply Sirona, by the way.
Sorry?
2 people from Dentsply Sirona are on, so you've got a Dentsply scanner, yeah?
Oh, yeah, I do. I was going to say, one of the reasons why I think it's I'm having this advantage, I think, is because I've got a scanner. And actually, as I said, I mentioned SureSmile, and when I started with SureSmile, I was looking through the system and they were explaining this to me, and I read one thing, it said scan only, and I thought, why are you doing that? You're going to lose half the market. I thought that's a mistake. Actually, it's not. It's the most sensible thing they could do. It really is, because that really means that you've got a lot more choice. So I think one great thing with SureSmile that I found is variable trim line. So now if you're using impressions, you haven't got the luxury of that, because the problem with impressions are, I'm sure, and I know you can take a bloody good impression.
I was going to say, it's careful.
But let's face it, not everyone does. And I've seen what comes into laboratories, and probably only about 25 to 40% is what I would call good quality. Everything else is just about okay, and half of it's pretty bad. And the problem with aligner systems that accept impressions is that they then have to deal with the fact that the impressions may not be good enough. And then, of course, the problem with impressions are, even if they are good, they could be some mucocompressive effect. So therefore, if you're scanning, that problem's gone away. So one great thing I think with SureSmile is the fact that actually you can ask for variable trim line. So you can look at the case and, like, for example, if you've got like long clinical crown heights and you've got rotations and stuff, well, you can start with a scalloped aligner, and actually that's better at the beginning for that sort of case. And then you can actually change it if you want. There's a way of doing it, but you can actually change it so that as the aligners go through, the trim line changes, so you get more of a straight finish line. So it's really customizable, actually, and that's one. But that fundamentally comes from the fact that they only accept scans. So yeah, I have to say that I think that's one reason that particular system's probably been one of the most predictable systems I've used. It's just because they're eliminating an obvious form of error. But yeah,
and that almost allows them to sort of back what they've got a bit more, rather than sort of holding back a little bit.
Exactly. The whole concept of people sort of look at scalloped aligners and think, oh, they look nicer. Well, that's not one of the reasons they're doing it. They are doing it. When you see scalloped aligners, aligner companies are doing that because they can't use variable trim line, because they can't trust that you've got the impression correct. Because what they don't want is that impression digging into the patient's gum and causing soreness and then having to start all over again. So it is, I do, unfortunately, for people that don't have scanners, I think, you're kind of missing out slightly on a little bit of on some of the options out there. So I think we're all heading in that direction anyway. So I must have taken about 10 scans today, actually. I have to say. So just hardly ever take impressions at all now. So
that'll keep the 2 Dentsply people happy. You just mentioned there in terms of biotype and things like that, and we had Rena on a few weeks ago, and that was one of the things we actually discussed. Is she's seeing more and more of sort of anterior recession and things like that. So we'll just nip back quickly to assessment. And what are you looking at in terms of soft tissue and risks as much as anything, but assessment of the case in that way?
Absolutely. I think it's, obviously, the patient if the patient has a thin biotype or recession already, then obviously we're not looking to procline the teeth at all. Clearly, that's kind of where the concept of landmark teeth can help. So if you've got something that's well placed, you'll only take it to that position. But of course, the other thing you've got to factor in is if you just look at the before and after, or just press play on your digital setup, you may not notice that a lot of aligner companies use this concept. I'm sure most people have heard of round tripping. So round tripping is where this happens. Okay, so the teeth move forwards and then come back. Now, round tripping isn't something that you just say yes or no to. If I've got a patient with slightly iffy biotype, not too much recession, what I might write on my plan is, I'm happy to accept a little bit of limited round tripping. Does that make sense? And actually, you can measure the round tripping. So, someone like SureSmile or ClearCorrect, any Invisalign, is click the grid function on. So, you know, the grid function that comes on, look at the occlusal, watch the staging and see how far they go forwards or backwards. So as a rule, if I've got, and the other thing is, how long is that round tripping going on for? So if you've got like a 25, 30 aligner case and you're round tripping reasonable area recession, who knows, for 14 to 16 weeks, you know, you could have it. Yeah, you can have it. Whereas if I limit the round tripping to perhaps only 1 mil and not 2, and it's a 10 aligner case, I'm only round tripping for 3 or 4 aligners, it's not the end of the world. Does that make sense? So I can't actually give you any, you know, solid stats or studies on how much you can round trip and what the effect is, because I don't think anyone's really ever done anything on that. But I know for a fact that if I limit round tripping and if the cases are shorter, the risk of recession is much, much lower. And I've done some cases where I've actually stupidly caused a little bit. I've done it, you know, it happens from time to time, but I'm very, very careful with that. So yeah,
that's really interesting though, because you say like you can see a before and after and think it's fine. They're not, you know, they're not out the envelope of bone and things like that. But actually, say at some point they may have done in the process of creating the space to get them in the right position again.
Definitely, and you know, and one reason why they do that is they're trying. You know, a lot of these aligner companies are trying to rely less on the dentist to carry out the IPR. I understand it because in reality, most people don't carry out enough IPR. And they, you know, or they do too much, but they don't carry out enough. And if you don't carry it out enough, then the teeth just get stuck. So actually round tripping.
And then the dentist complains about refinements and more alignment.
Exactly. And so, and you know, this is actually, it's funny enough because that whole concept is kind of what happened years ago with fixed ortho. And so a lot of people, you know, got into fixed ortho because actually the teeth moved really well. But what they didn't realize was the teeth often ended up on a much wider curve. Does that make sense? So the wire just unwinds, but you end up with patients who, you know, teeth are stuck forward, but look, they're straight teeth. But they're often, you know, you looked at them and it didn't look very good, and they completely flared them. So that's kind of, it goes back to this whole concept of measuring the curve, knowing where you want the teeth to finish, carrying out the right amount of IPR to end up on that point. And then, as you say, nowadays, particularly with aligners, even if you are round tripping, to make sure that you control the amount you're actually going to do. So all the features in the software for a lot of these aligner companies, it's there for you to use. And there's lots of, I mean, that's just one thing. There's lots of little things that, you know, when we sort of teach, we go through now. Look at this, and look at this. And there's one feature, and I'm bigging up Dent Splicer owner here, but
they're still watching.
Feature,
that's why
they're still watching. But there's one feature they know. There's one feature that I didn't realise I had until I'd done a few cases, where you can. It's called clipping frame, where you can take a cross section through the teeth, and you can actually kind of rotate through. And what that does is it basically shows you your envelope function or where it would be. Obviously, the teeth aren't moving, but you can kind of see this cross section through, you know, overjet, overbite, and the more you're used to the concept of anterior guidance, etc. That is just gold dust. I mean, I look at that and wow, that is really cool. So I'm sure a lot of the others will have that at some point, but actually, you know, a lot of this stuff comes from thinking ortho-restoratively. If I wasn't thinking that way, I wouldn't be looking at it. Simple as that.
Yeah, so that's the argument, say, with trying to do more of these sort of courses or systems or things that you're going to pick up just through the nature of the different systems that they use and different softwares. You'll pick up different things and think about things. Definitely. Even if you're doing Invisalign, but you've done 2 other systems, you're still going to think about those other aspects as well.
Definitely. I mean, that's always been our goal. We never, you know, we've always, you know, we realised many years ago that the best thing was not to try and shove your own system down someone else's throat. And at one point, we were running, you know, an Inman aligner course or this aligner course or that. But actually that kind of, we just took that away because we thought there's no point doing that. Let's just, you know, we'll teach some concepts and stuff, and we just want people to go out and do the stuff they do better. That's kind of what it is. It sounds a little bit corny, but actually, I felt much better about that approach because, you know, at the end of the day, we're all using different things anyway. And we realize if you just apply these principles to any system, you can make any system work better, and that which has got to be the right way.
And then if we move it a little bit on then from that to, well, it's sort of a bit on the planning side and execution still, but one of the other questions we had was about Dahl, and particularly the point of view that maybe that's something we talk about and do a lot more here than maybe other parts of the world. Is that something you find? And
definitely. I mean, traveling a lot, well, not recently, but historically traveling a lot, you do notice that Dahl in some countries, I don't even know what it is, and actually definitely the UK has sort of taken the idea much further than most other countries. I think some of them are kind of, I wouldn't say catching up, but some of them are doing some bits and pieces. And you'd think there'll be a lot more of it in Scandinavia. There isn't actually, and that might be because actually there's been quite a lot of American houses of occlusion influence in those areas where they weren't really using Dahl, so therefore it was kind of getting slightly pushed aside. The key thing I'd say with Dahl is that it is, a lot of people don't understand when to use it, and a lot of people actually think about using it when it's already too late. And this is why this whole concept I said earlier, we go back to what we said earlier, you've got the patient with reducing anterior guidance but no posterior wear. If that patient has a well-aligned arch, and there's a few other things that they need as well, if that patient has a well-aligned arch, reasonable class 1, etc., doesn't have a stepped occlusion or anything like that, then that's a Dahl case right there and then. And if you do the Dahl on that patient now, you can basically maintain that patient's guidance. That's what I've been doing on my patients. I've got some patients 25-30 years they've had Dahl build-ups on their teeth. I might have replaced them a couple of times, but I've kept their teeth in guidance for 25-30 years without literally having to pick up a drill, other than skim off the old composite and recycle it or replace it every now and then. So Dahl, it really needs, unfortunately the studies, as good as they are, there's very little on when you should use it and when you shouldn't. And the problem is, I know that Riaz is doing some stuff on it, which is really good. Riaz Yar's doing some stuff on Dahl, but I'm still not convinced that we'll have enough of a kind of, there'll be enough big studies that sort of say do it like this versus do it like this. You see what I mean? So I with Dahl,
proper literature base and things like that.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I know what works, and I know if you use it early enough and simple enough, it is one of the most powerful minimally invasive treatments and preventative treatments that's out there, and it is also something every single dentist should be able to do. And you don't also need to, I'll stick my neck out and say, you don't need to be getting stents and that sort of rubbish done for it. If you did, it's probably too late. Actually, you're probably using it too late. Dahl is something that if you follow a certain pattern of balance on the teeth, and if the teeth have to be in the right position, you have to look at the axial inclinations, etc., etc. But if you follow a certain pattern, it's all freehand. And I've been doing it freehand for 30 years, and I've never had a patient come back in crying and screaming I've had to remove it, so the key thing is it's just got to be done on the right patient. And a great thing with ortho is that for a lot of young dentists, you might experience the need to do Dahl quite early on, in perhaps if you're trying to make space for a retainer, because with all the will in the world, however well the aligner case is set up, occasionally you can't put your wire on because the occlusion's in the way. And that's one of the best situations to then try out a Dahl retainer, where basically you put your wire on, but then you have to put very small palatal platforms to make sure that the force is, firstly, that you're not biting on the wire, and that you slightly disengage the occlusion fractionally, and that basically the forces are going through the long axis of the teeth. That, of course, then may mean you shouldn't be doing that on a patient you've done tons of posterior expansion, because obviously you can't then use an Essex to while the Dahl effect is working. But it's quite good for simple anterior alignment cases. But I mean, I could yap on about Dahl for hours, but I don't.
But essentially you're saying your prime candidate is you've got good posterior occlusion, class 1 stuff, you've got that anterior wear without it yet affecting, so you've still got maybe a touch of canine guidance or something like that. You've not collapsed into a group function. You started doing bits, and then you're just building up the anteriors and letting the posteriors come into position. So have you done that with sort of post alignment as well? You've done that as part of
Yeah,
it.
I have, because it doesn't always, particularly if you're only doing anterior alignment ortho, and you're not set fixing everything, you're not doing major large vertical changes. Sometimes I actually just do my alignment and then I actually use a bit of dial after to kind of actually almost complete the case. I know it sounds a bit odd, but sometimes you need it, particularly if you've had a lot of wear on the teeth, there's a lot of tooth surface loss. I'm not going to, I'll spend a certain amount of time with ortho, but actually the funny thing is, dial is a kind of ortho because it's effectively a flat anterior biplane. That's actually what it is. But the key thing is to make sure that you're placing it and using it, as I say, in the right way. It's very easy to load the wrong teeth, and it's very easy to, it could cause a bit of discomfort. And the other thing about dial, I must emphasize, is it is not something you just stick it on and say goodbye to the patient. The first time I placed the bonding on, believe it or not, I'm not thinking about dial. I'm actually thinking about deprogramming the patient. That's what's actually happening. They're going to go away. 2 weeks later, they're going to come back. Then they should be eccentric. They don't, not always, but they are. And that's when you might see your MIPCR slide, and you're going to have to readjust to then rebalance those contacts. At that point, you should be good to go, basically. So it's got to be, needs to be followed up. But the key thing is there's a lot of patients you need to avoid. So I don't do dial on big class 2 div 2s or anterior open bite patients or patients with massively misaligned arches. There's no point. I figure that if you've got misaligned arch, we might as well just have the ortho. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's going to take 3, 4, 5 months of ortho. Why not? So
then from the people, lots of people saying hi to you, Tiff. From sort of doing dial and things like that. We have a little question about the reverse triangle technique.
Yeah.
So is that sort of the way that you are doing your?
Yeah. Most of my dial cases, I'll use reverse triangle technique, and basically the idea of that was to think of a way of making something that was stronger than what was strong. Okay, I don't know stronger, but strong, and also really simple with an easy blend. Because the problem is, it could have been post ortho, it could just, it could be restorative. My patients are not rich. Okay, my practice is in Sidcup in Kent. It's it's a bit like EastEnders, really. It's a bit like that around there. Okay, in a nice way. And it's not Wimpole Street, etc. So I can't. I mean, I can, and I did, and certain patients did, but I can't charge £500 a tooth. Okay, I can't. So I needed something that was going to be cost effective, that was actually going to be strong. And so for years, actually, even before reverse triangle technique, I used to do quite a lot of single shape build-ups, and I playing around materials to try and get them right, and I'd kind of blend the material down the tooth and feather it in, and it actually worked okay. Then about 11, 12, 13 years ago, the nano hybrid started. I think the first one was Empress Direct, which was nice, actually. It's a nice material. Got pretty good results with that, and then I was playing around a lot, and then Venus Diamond launched, I think about 11, 12 years ago, something like that, and that really just had the right optical characteristics to do it really simply. So effectively there is a triangle of denting that goes from the front to the back, okay, and then that basically blocks the light, and then on the front the enamel goes on. So it's almost kind of, as I say, do you know what, let me it's going to be easier if I just put it up on the screen, isn't it?
Here's one I made earlier.
Do you know what, I'm not sure I actually got that one open, but let me have a little look here. So it's going to be a bit annoying this now, because I thought I'd actually had that open, but I haven't got that open because I thought I was going to show you something else. But basically with Venus Diamond, the idea really was to it had the absolute best optical properties, and so I started placing them on with this really simple method. The key point being, there's only one layer of dentine, as in one increment of dentine. There's not two, there's not five. There's one increment material that goes on the tooth. I adapt it, I shape it, I cure it. I then take one increment of enamel, okay, I place that on the tooth, the whole window of the tooth effectively, place it on, adapt it and cure it. And of course, some people get a little bit kind of, uncomfortable because they think, what about the shrinkage? Well, on the edge of the tooth, it's irrelevant. As long as you've got enough depth of cure, it's not an issue. There's an argument that actually it's stronger the bigger the piece of material. Another little thing with that technique is I'm always making sure that, you know, the material comes out of the syringe in the most untwisted way. Because sometimes, you know, you see the nurse puts the stuff on a pad and then it's a bit splattered here and there, and you scrape a bit up and you've got like these air layers. That's just all fractures waiting to happen. The way it is in that tube is the way that it was born, and so it needs to come out of that tube, you know, like it's being born again, and come onto my flat plastic or material. And so I'm going to place it with a minimum amount of tear onto the tooth. And basically when I did that, it seemed to give me, you know, really, really good results. And then with a lot of patients and follow up over time, I found again and again that actually it wasn't, cases weren't failing. It was really strong as well. You know, I mean, really, really strong material. So I'm going to just show you let me just flip this round. Let's see if this works. How do I do that? There we go. So I know lots of people would have seen this. Oh, what can you see? Oh, you can see it now. There we go. So there we go. I mean, it's not exactly the most brilliant slide in the world, but that's basically reverse triangle technique. So the yellow color is going to be, if it was Venus diamond, it would be OL or OM, so opaque medium, opaque light. There's opaque bleach as well, but I never really use that actually. And then the green is the enamel shade, which is either A1, B1 or BL or something. But notice how the dentine comes pretty much all the way to the front. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, if you drop that dentine back, say for example, you put it here, and then you have a little, and it lifts up here. What will then happen is you'll see a grey line. Okay. Yeah. If you take that dentine and you plonk it over the front, you see a white line. But if you get it right on that joint, okay, and you can see it almost goes all the way to the top, it should blend in perfectly. And of course, you know, that's something that we do, you know, in hands-on courses and stuff. We teach that all hands-on. So it's obviously a better thing to learn hands-on. But, you know, I've got this all recorded as an online course, and I know, you know, a lot of people have watched that online course, and they, you know, they're often away doing it. So it's super, you know, I never really set out to think, I'll come back to me. I never really set out to think I'm going to develop a reverse triangle technique. It was more by need, because post-ortho, I didn't want to charge a patient another £2 or £3 grand just to do the edges. I wanted to be able to charge them at that time, you know, £150 to £250 a tooth. So that I could do 6 edges, and actually that's what I did. And then long-term follow-up, I have to say, Venus Diamond has been really good. There are other materials.
Venus is the choice material?
For me, Venus Diamond has definitely been one of the best. I'm willing to try other stuff. I have tried, and I think, you know, I think Didier Dietsch's material is really nice, and Spiro, beautiful. And actually, I have done a few cases with that have also survived a very long time. And also, I can't remember the one by Kerr. There's one by Kerr that's very nice. Can't remember the name again. And there's another one that actually works quite nicely. But they do need, some of them don't. So, you know, I need to sort of test them a little bit to check, because, as I say, it might be you have to vary the size of the triangles to get the blend correct. But the point being is that it's really nice to be able to play something that you don't have to bevel it. You literally just sandblast it, etch it, bond it, put the dentine on, put the enamel on, and then basically polish it back. And it's so easy. And then the other great thing about edge bonding, and I feel quite strongly, is that if you can do good edge bonding, you don't need to do composite veneers. Okay, you don't need to do composite veneers. Composite veneers for me are fine; they have their place. But I used to place composite veneers kind of when I couldn't trust myself to do edge bonding. Do you see what I mean? And yeah, some people want to build their teeth out. Some people want white teeth, and that's fine. And there will always be indications for composite veneers. But what I would say is that, having done lots of composite veneers, when they fail 5, 10, 15 years down the line, they're not the easiest thing to replace. When an edge bond fails, it is so easy to replace. That's the difference. And so I think these things, it needs to be a patient decision as well, of course, because some patients might say, I want my tooth to stick out more or be white all the way down the front. But I would also say to them, well, you know, 5, 10 years time, when that fails, this is going to be a lot easier than the other way. So yeah, that's sort of where it came from, and it does certainly seem to, the idea seems to have taken off. I mean, I made that name up, reverse triangle technique, and it's all over Instagram now, which is quite cool.
That's it. Max just asked, what about Venus Pearl? So any particular reason why you're diamond over pearl, or
Yeah. We teach with both on our course. Pearl and diamond look exactly the same. The handling properties of pearl are softer. So in theory, it seems like more people would like it. Personally, I prefer diamond. That's just me. And also, you know, a few people that I know that do edge bonding very similar to the way I do, and get similar results, also prefer diamond. One of whom is my nephew Haroon Latif, by the way, who's like awesome dentist, and his edge bonding is better than mine. In fact, I went in from doing mine. I've done my ortho now. He's doing mine. But again, he prefers Venus diamond as well. So yeah, that's why I use it. We have pearl in the drawer, and if I run out occasionally, I'll use it. But it's just for, I think, just for the way we manipulate the material. I prefer using diamond.
The stiffness is better for it.
It's the stiffness, yeah. I don't heat it up. That's the last thing I'd want, particularly when you're doing reverse triangle technique. You don't want the material flowing or flopping around. It needs to be actually solid, basically.
Perfect. I mean, that's covered all of the pre-questions that we had. If anyone's got questions now, please do pop them in. One last question that I have that I'd like to ask everyone. Is there anything that, and I'm going to take away your intraoral camera because you've already sold everyone on their intraoral camera, but, you know, is there something that you know now that you wish you knew earlier, or you wish you were doing earlier, or, you know, just a tip for sort of younger dentists starting out that isn't getting an intraoral camera?
Yeah,
because you sold us on that one already.
I've sold you on that one as well.
Ethically sold us on that one.
I would say to you, the most important thing, and I'm kind of probably touched on this already, but I'll say it again. The most important thing is to think about the long term of what you're doing for somebody. It's very easy, and I've made that mistake myself, to get caught up in the excitement of cosmetic dentistry and to think it's all about before and afters, and, you know, it's going to look like this and your life is done. And this whole kind of idea that somehow I've finished the treatment, now you can go away or go back to your dentist. No, you don't. You're responsible for that treatment. If you think that, you know, you do a big cosmetic case, or it's a big ortho case or something, that somebody else, another dentist, is, you know, can understand what you've done, or look after the retainers, or can maintain these veneers or something, that is totally irresponsible, completely responsible. And I'm only saying that because that's what I did. Okay, so I had this sort of thing where, you know, you became a cosmetic dentist was like this pseudo specialist, you know, white coat, name embroidered thing. Okay, and you walked around pouncing around thinking you're some kind of hot stuff. Okay, great, I did that, and your patients were crying, they're so happy, and they left. But you know what, a lot of these people come back and you look at what you've done and you think, why did why did I do it, or B, why did I not carry on seeing you? Because if I'd carried on seeing that patient, I would have noticed that perhaps the teeth were moving, I could have intercepted something, but the dentist said nothing to them. So for me, I think that, you know, yes, you want to learn how to do cosmetic dentistry and ortho, but the most important lesson, and, you know, be that doing a filling, doing dentures, is you develop long-term relationships with your patients, that you actually get your patients to trust you, and that you become their friend. And when you find somebody that you're happy with, you stay there and you turn that practice into somewhere great, rather than thinking I need to leave and find a private practice. Okay, my practice was 100% NHS, 50% exempt. You know, a lot of really entitled people, and I did it by talking to all of those people. Okay, and there were some arguments and there was this and that, but it was by demonstrating to them with cameras, fundamentally, what was going on, by educating them about what was changing over time. And, you know, if I think back, you know, 30 years later, I couldn't ask for a better situation to be in. If I'd gone from practice to practice, I wouldn't have known these people, you know. And as a result, you know, you get everyone that comes in that's new, that sees me, they know me already because I've been treating their family or friends. So it's really kind of, I would say, you know, my real sort of final thing for younger dentists is think about the long term. You know, I call it the lifetime patient. That's what dentistry should be about. It should be about what you're doing for this person, and then how you're going to look after them for life. Don't just take the money and run. That, and this whole, people will joke about, if you want to, you know, I hear people joke about, oh, if you're a dentist, make sure you move every 5 years. You know what? I find that comment quite sickening, because I think, why would you say that? You know, the more you're responsible, 5 years later, if I see something that I'm not happy with, what I've done to patients, I've said, do you know what? I'm not happy with that. It shouldn't be, and I've changed stuff. And it doesn't actually, it might cost me 300 quid to change a filling, but that £300 to change a filling on one patient will buy you more value than, you know, 10 grand a month on Google, whatever. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think this is the thing. Yeah. People kind of think they've got to spend on attracting new patients. The reality is the new patients are probably, in my opinion, the ones that are far more likely to turn around and bite you on the backside. I think that if you treat your own patients who you know and they understand all these functional, restorative, ortho changes going on, you'll end up doing vastly more treatment on people you know already. I mean, why wouldn't we want to do that? And I think our whole profession needs a look at the way we actually think about dentistry to try and reflect that attitude.
Well, that's all one of your business partners perhaps thinking, isn't it? It's turning your own patients into super referrers and things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
We had a couple of questions popping in. Keep them coming in, guys, if you've got anything you want to ask Tiff. So Carnage has asked, is there any requirements for your courses, or can fresh graduates apply?
And we get people that are literally first year out, and it's okay to do that. And we'll certainly put everything in perspective, and we get people who literally nearly retired. It's quite surprising the range of people you get. So they are there for everybody. I mean, I'm not going to say that. I think I used to say, "Oh, learn the basics." But you know what? Actually, understanding an envelope of function is basic. And it's not something that should come to you 10, 15 years into clinical practice. I wish I understood that right from the beginning. I wish I understood more about tooth wear right from the beginning. And then these things aren't rocket science, okay? Maybe dealing with the more complicated cases can be harder, but actually intercepting is not difficult. I mean, one of the simplest treatments that we could do for our patients is just give them mesis retainers, quite frankly. So, I'd say anyone can do these courses. The reality is it's then what you take away and how you implement it, and really importantly, then how you make sure you get mentored, because we always have found that, and we kind of include mentoring with our courses. We always do that, like on one case, etc. But beyond that, it's a really good idea to just, if you're not sure, ask. For example, with all the mentoring that we're doing for, Invisalign and ClearCorrect, SureSmart, etc., we change about 75% of the digital setups. Okay, not aggressively, but we refine them and we see things that actually could be better. And I think that's the really important thing, that you can really make a massive difference if you've got someone just to have a little bit of help. And once you've had that a few times, it starts to click and you start to see it normally. But yeah, that's basically it.
Minigrams just asked, how often do you review dial cases? Now, I know you said sort of 2 weeks later, see if they've deprogrammed, but over the course, what's the time period like of the initial treatment, and then is it just routine after that?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends how much you dial them open by. So if you only dial someone by 1 millimeter, because maybe you're accommodating a retainer, well, I'll see them after the 2 weeks to adjust the occlusion. And then actually, I might only have to see them, I'd hope, within a month or month and a half. They're closed, and I'll see them again, and then that's probably it until the next checkup. If I've dialed them open by 5 mil, and 5, little tip, is my absolute maximum, wouldn't go beyond that. And if you have to do more than 5, the high likelihood is you've got posterior wear, you should be looking at something more full arch anyway. Mm-hmm. But if it's 5, then there's a reasonable chance I might see them 2 or 3 times in the actual settling period. So it could be 2 weeks, it could be 6 weeks later, it could be 2 or 3 months later as well. Because actually, I wanted to make sure the teeth are, settling correctly. Erupting is the wrong word. It's actually compensation, really. And the other thing that I do, it's pretty reasonably well known, is I'll occasionally do a little bit of feathery IPR between the back teeth, just to make sure that our contacts aren't all jammed together, basically. So it could be. Just depends on how much you're actually opening.
Another dial question, again, sort of an assessment kind of thing. Do you have an age limit on dial? You know, is there an eruptive potential concern, obviously, and things like that you're looking at? But again, you said sort of you're only really going to use that up if they've already had eruption and things like that.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good question. So, I mean, on the younger age, not really. I've done it on, you know, I've used dial on sort of 15, 16-year-olds when they've had severe wear, because that's actually what we all should be able to do, and not refer that to the hospital as like literally taking the national lottery, because, you know, they may be seen, they may not be seen. So every single dentist you've got to deal with wear on children, because it's so easy to deal with. Okay, I know that's quite a statement, that actually, but at the other end, yeah, in theory, you know, I think in theory you would expect older people to dial less, but I've been using dial on patients in sort of 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s for some time. It still seems to work. I think my oldest patient's about 86, and a year or two ago we did her 4th dial build-up after 27 years. So 27 years ago I did the first, it wore off a few years later, etc., etc. And what we've been doing that whole time is just maintaining her anterior guidance. Before that, she didn't have any, and you could see she's got crowns on back teeth and corners busted off teeth. Did the anterior build-ups, and nothing's ever broken since on those back teeth. She had caries on one tooth, but that's basically it. So yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think anyone knows the answer to that, actually. You know, some people say, how often can you redo dial? Don't know. I've done it. That patient, I've done it 4 times. So I don't really know what the answer is. But I think 27 years is a pretty good amount of time to know that actually nothing negative's happened in that time at all. So yeah.
David Grace has asked, can you expand on your IPR? Is it to the point that the floss still catches, but simply less tight contact? Do you contact that provides no resistance? I'm guessing that's in relation to what you just said there about the dial.
Yeah, so that's very good point. If it's in relation to dull, no, I want the floss to still catch. So this is literally taking yellow contact strips and just making sure that the contacts aren't ultra tight. So I still want the floss to feel tight between the teeth. I do not want to open the contact. So, and yellow strips,
so it sort of guides properly.
Yeah, absolutely. All I'm doing is, and the reason being is, basically, I noticed, I mean, obviously I'm not using dial always for ortho here, but after some ortho cases, particularly cases where we've done retraction, and I was waiting for the dial effect to occur, it was a little slow. And so I just thought, why is that happening? So I just went through and just checked, and I just noticed that, you know, particularly with some heavy retraction, the contact points were mega tight between some of the back teeth, because we'd been kind of yanking them all back. And then what I did was just literally ease them fractionally, and then it starts to work. Okay. So I do that anyway now, whether I've done ortho or not, just to make sure that we're not, you know, you've not got really locked contacts. But if a yellow strip kind of goes through, I mean, we take it through maybe 5 or 6 times, a yellow strip is actually 0.08 mil, but it will not cut that. It'll probably, if you're lucky, cut about 0.02. So it cuts virtually nothing. So actually the floss should still pin through. Hopefully that answers the question.
100%. We've just said Carnology is absolutely sold on the course by the sound of it. Which courses would you recommend starting? Because I know IS, you've got various ones, right? You've got sort of ABBs. ABB
is probably the best start point for most people. I mean, actually, in reality, you know, we get a lot of Invisalign users that take ABB. They've got a little experience with Invisalign, but actually, because the day one is our kind of version of ortho, which is a bit different, and day 2 is ortho-restorative, dull, edge bonding, and all the other stuff, that seems to fit together really nicely. And, you know, if you've been doing Invisalign and you watch that course, or a lot of people saying, oh, wow, now I know that, and now I know why that happened, etc., etc. And it's also kind of pitched as an intro as well. So we're teaching basic ortho assessment, you know, going through cases and doing a proper ortho assessment like a specialist would do, understanding compromised versus non-compromised cases. And that gives most people enough. We used to run those 2 days separately, actually, but then once we started running the day 2, the ortho-restorative, the number of people that said to me, God, I wish I'd done this course earlier. That's why we just thought we'd put them together, and actually it just seems to work really well. So that's probably, for most people, the start point. Beyond that, there's there's obviously quite a lot. I mean, if you've got tons of ortho experience and you've been doing ortho for years and you want to really, then, Ross Hobson's course is probably worth a punt as well, because his advanced course is, it's something else actually. But that's really for, he won't let you go on that unless you've done a lot already. So.
Well, it looks like we've got one last question that's going to tie it in nicely with impressions. So Khalid Ahmed is asking, how do you feel about using RPDs as removable dial appliances? Anything involves a denture, I'll be happy with it.
Yeah,
we're talking more
why
here
not?
about using the anteriors, aren't we, rather than a posterior and dialing.
Yeah, I don't see one, and I mean, Dahl's original appliance looked like something like that anyway, didn't it? So yeah, I don't see why not. I suppose when you look at the studies that they did on Dahl, whenever they used a removable appliance, there was a slightly there was issues with compliance. Yeah, so it didn't work as well, and there were slightly more perio issues as well. Now, whether that was because the patients weren't that stable or not, I don't know. So I think there's some negatives with it, but I think there might be certain situations where it could work well. If I think rightly, I might have done that maybe once, years and years ago, but it's probably only once. I think if you look at Richard Porter, Harpal Channa, Martin Kelleher, I'm trying to think of all the names here, Neil Poyser's study on Dahl. It's not the study, the article where they pull a lot of the data together. Some of the studies, I can't remember the name of the studies actually, but they talk about the difference between removable versus the fixed dial appliance, basically, or bonded dial appliance, and it works, but there's some slight disadvantages as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I think that rounds it nicely. That brings it right back into impressions. So that was good. Thank you so much for that. That was absolutely fantastic.
That's
and
right,
I know everyone's got a bunch out of it. BACD conference, will we see you there?
I'm going. Yeah, I'm going. I'm actually. I'm allowed to say it. Well, yeah. I'm moderating for Pascal. Yeah.
Oh, exclusive.
I'm lucky. I know Pascal really well because I know him really well. So I took his course many years ago, and then believe it or not, he actually came on an Inman aligner course in California, and he was sat at the front of my class. Can you believe it? So I kind of got to know him really, really well, and so actually it's really nice. So I'm really looking forward to that because he is like probably one of my 2-3 main inspirations in dentistry. So yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Well, we'll see you up there, and that actually segues nicely into the next one, which is going to be with Fran Belsford, and we're going to be talking through some biomimetics, and we've got some special guests coming to that as well. It isn't Pascal Magnier though, so perfect. Thank you so much, guys, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers, Tiff.
Thanks, Rupert. Thanks very much.